As the days become shorter and the nights become colder, I often find myself reminded of an old Irish storyteller I once knew. Oh, the tales he could tell on a cold winter's night, as the wood fire crackled and embers danced and skittered across the hearth. Tales of screaming skulls and demon dogs, and the phantom hearse pulled by a team of headless horses, and of course, true stories of the fairy folk. Now, would I ever be telling you the story of Timothy O'Flynn? He would begin. No? Well, good. This Timothy O'Flynn was a rich young man, always out drinking and carousing and carrying on with the girls till the wee hours of the morning. Everyone said, he's going straight to hell, that one is. But that didn't bother Timothy O'Flynn. He didn't believe in hell. He didn't believe in anything. He didn't believe in the devil, or in the fairy folk, or even in ghosts, which of course every right-thinking person believes in. Well, one fine night, this Timothy O'Flynn was out with a young girl of whom he was particularly fond, when suddenly the poor girl burst into tears, saying, "You got to marry me, Timothy. You've just got to. For you see, you've gotten me into trouble." Well now, this posed quite a problem for Timothy O'Flynn, for he loved the poor girl dearly, or at least as much as he could love anyone. But he loved his freedom too, and the thought of becoming a husband and a father was, well, it was something he'd much rather postpone for as long as possible. So he decided to go out and walk a spell and sort of sort things out. Well, he walked, and he walked, and he walked, till he was far from home, and the clock, had there been one to hear, struck 12 midnight, the hour when all reasonable people know that it's pure foolishness to be out and about. And lo, he saw coming towards him a band of fairy folk, the leprechauns, you know, and they were carrying something large and heavy with them. And as they drew near, he could see what it was. A corpse! Now you or I might have run away that very instant, but not Timothy O'Flynn. He didn't move a muscle. Not that he didn't want to run away, but you see, some terrible invisible force seemed to glue him right there to that very spot. "Ah," said one of the little people, "if it isn't Timothy O'Flynn, just the very man we'd be looking for. Ah, Timothy O'Flynn, 'tis a bad life you've led, and before the devil comes to take you away, we've come to offer you one last chance to make amends. So be a good lad and lift that corpse up onto your back." Well now, Timothy O'Flynn was quickly starting to reevaluate his whole attitude towards the devil and the little people and ghosts and the whole kit and caboodle. But no power on earth would compel him to lift that horrible object up onto his back. "The devil I'll do such a thing," he said. "A bad choice of words," said the little man, and in an instant the corpse flew up onto his back, grasping him by the throat with icy cold fingers, his clammy legs wrapped round his middle. "Well," said the little man, laughing, "maybe the next time you'll be willing to do what you're told to be doing when you're told to do it, without resorting to such a disagreeable attitude. Anything, just get this corpse off me back, and I promise you a changed man I'll be. Anything. "Well, then," said the little man, "you must carry this corpse on your back all the way to Temple Seamus, and there you must bury it in the church, under the flagstones of the centre aisle, don't you know? Now really, isn't there some other, but be warned. Maybe you won't be allowed to bury it to Temple Seamus. Maybe you'll be having to carry it all the way to Carrickadurus, Or maybe you'll be having to try Timple Ronan. Or maybe, just maybe, you'll be having to go all the way to Kilbreda. Kilbreda, who knows in which of these places you'll be allowed to lay down your burden. But be further warned, all this must be accomplished before the rising of the sun, or in that very instant the devil himself will grasp you by the legs and pull you down with him into the fiery pit of hell. Well now, Timothy O'Flynn did not need to be told a thing twice, and he ran quickly. As quickly, that is, as one can run with a corpse on his back, towards Timple Seamus. Unfortunately, there was hardly more than a sliver of moon out that night, and poor Timothy O'Flynn stumbled over stones and tripped over hedges and banged his poor head into the limbs of trees. But finally, all bleeding and bruised, he made it to the churchyard at Timple Seamus. A high stone wall surrounded the churchyard, but fortunately there was a place where the wall was in disrepair, and Timothy O'Flynn managed to squeeze through a small hole, a difficult thing to do when you have a corpse on your back. He made it to the church, but found to his horror that the heavy oaken door was locked. "Try the key," cried out a voice in the darkness. "Who's that?" "Try the key over the arch." "Now, who is that?" "Now, who else would it be? 'Tis me, the corpse." "You can talk?" "Would I want to?" Timothy O'Flynn carefully ran his hand up over the arch, which curved up over the doorway, until at last he felt something long and cold. It was the key. Soon he was in the church, darkness all around him. "Light a candle, for God's sake," said the corpse. And at length Timothy O'Flynn did find a candle, and some matches to boot. And in the flickering candle's light he made his way down the center aisle, until at last he heard the corpse say, "Bury me here." Well, fortunately, there was a spade lying about, and Timothy O'Flynn quickly pried up the flagstones and dug down deep into the earth below, when suddenly from out of the ground rose up another corpse. "Leave me in peace, leave me in peace," cried the corpse, "unless you'd be joining me here forever." Well, Timothy O'Flynn quickly made his apologies, filled the grave back in, and carefully replaced the flagstones with a speed that would have astonished anyone. "Carrickadurus," reminded the corpse. "But I don't know the way to Carrickadurus." "I do," said the corpse with an icy breath, and pointed the way. Well, an hour or two later, exhausted and much the worse for wear, Timothy O'Flynn arrived in Carrickadurus. But no sooner had he entered the churchyard than hundreds of ghosts rose up from out of their graves, crying, "Go back! Go back!" Well, even the corpse was scared. "Timple Ronan," he shouted, "and be quick about it." But no sooner had he reached Timple Ronan than some strange invisible force grasped poor Timothy by the scruff of the neck, lifted him high into the air, and hurled him into a ditch well over 100 feet away. I know, said a very tired Timothy O'Flynn. "Kilbreda." "Hurry, man, hurry," shouted the corpse. "'Tis only another hour till daylight." So on and on he went. Sometimes poor Timothy O'Flynn was so tired he had to crawl a foot at a time on his hands and knees, but finally he made it to the churchyard at Kilbreda. and with his last few ounces of strength, he tore into the earth with his bare fingers, until at last he reached a large black box. Timothy O'Flynn stepped back for a moment to catch his breath. The lid flew open. The box was empty. The corpse released his icy grip, slid down into the coffin, said, "Thank you ever so much. You've been a good lad," and closed the lid. The first rays of the morning sun gently spilt over the churchyard, and Timothy O'Flynn breathed one long sigh of relief. He had made it. He had finished his task in time. Or had he? For he suddenly noticed for the first time a large stone standing above the grave, and chiseled upon it was the name Timothy O'Flynn. "No!" he shouted as he felt himself being pulled down and down into the grave, earth sliding in around him, burying him alive. He couldn't breathe. All was darkness. And when he awoke later that morning, he found himself just outside his own village, lying on the very spot where he met the little people the night before. Well, from that moment on, Timothy O'Flynn was a changed man. Oh, he married his dear girl without a moment's hesitation, became a devoted husband and father, and a man whose lifetime of good deeds was a source of pride for his entire village. And that is the true story of Timothy O'Flynn.